Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I'm Doug Cannon.
On this week's show, we sort through the chaos of free agency and hear from a few of the winners at the recent NHL Awards show.
And as we sort through the chaos of free agency, we will pluck a few gems from the rubble.
Wow, all that and more. Let's drop the puck on episode 45. We are back. Doug, how's your summer treating you?
It's hot. Really, really hot.
It is quite warm
And
outside.
if anybody's listened to this show before, they know that we live in Phoenix. And right now, at noon, it's 100 and some odd degrees.
Well, anytime you get over 100, it pretty much all feels the same anyway until you get to about 130, and then you question all your life decisions.
Well, you know, to anybody that's never been to Arizona or the Phoenix area, go to the kitchen, turn the oven on to about 425.
Just climb in.
And then when it gets to temp, open the door and stick your face right there and feel that heat. That's what it's like living in the desert.
Yeah, that's about right. Or you can get in your car and drive around in that heat while people just sit through green lights for no reason as you just sit there melting into your leather interior.
It's a dry heat, but it's hot.
It's still heat.
Yes, it's hot.
Anyway, this isn't anybody
else's
else's
But what I tell
problem.
my friends back in Toronto, I don't have to shovel heat.
That's not yet. And that's why you play hockey here in the summer.
That's
I
right.
don't understand why people who don't play hockey don't take up hockey in the summer. Every time I go into a rink at like 3 in the afternoon, I'm like, I'm a genius.
And I'm playing tomorrow.
There you go. Because
That's
you're
how
a
I'm
genius.
spending my 4th of July.
I didn't even think of that. That's awesome. What better way to celebrate our nation's independence than by playing hockey? I get behind that.
Yeah.
So it is episode 45, Doug.
Yes, it is.
You know what that means.
Dun, da, da, da. The number game.
Aaron Asham?
I have him.
That's-
I do have him.
I had to throw Aaron Asham out there because that was the joke I made around episode like 18 when
He's
you said
still
this
playing.
game couldn't go on. I don't doubt that he is. He might be
You only
playing with you tomorrow.
You only played a couple of games for the Rangers last year. I think it was like 6 games.
Truth be told, there's not a lot of heavy hitters at number 45.
Jonathan Bernier.
Ooh. All right, I'll give you that. How about Sami Vatanen?
Oh, very good.
I'm going with the young Anaheim Ducks angle.
But my two, I had Jonathan and Aaron Ashman.
All right.
Because he's at the top of the list. Right? He can't get any more than AA.
That's true.
It's not a program. Those are his initials.
So when we get to episode 101, we're just going to start doing. I just got
Men's
that
league.
joke. I just got your joke and just ruined the whole thing. We're going to start just doing men's league jersey numbers or alphabetical numbers.
I did play with a guy that wore 420.
What? Who hasn't in men's league?
Oh,
right?
by the way, he had dreadlocks.
Doug Cannon, professional Jamaican hockey league performer. All right, so you would think it's July 3rd as we record this. What would you have to talk about? Well, this show is going to be 9 hours long.
Oh, there's a lot to talk about.
Free agency.
Yep.
Trades. Questionable trades. Draft. And even a little award show thrown in there.
It's funny when you came in and sat down and go, so what segment we're going to talk about the draft? And I went, oh, yeah, wasn't there?
Yeah.
There was a draft.
It'll have to be segment 15.
I was just so wrapped up on Tuesday 7-1 with free agency that I was glued to the NHL Network. I mean, my butt didn't move other than to get up and have another cup of coffee.
And I don't want to go on a huge tangent here because we don't really have time for it today, but that was Sportsnet. That was my first look at Sportsnet. Like, I'm used to getting TSN here
That's
in the
right,
States.
yeah.
So
And
it wasn't bad, but you could tell it was still early in their
it's okay.
coverage. Like,
Yeah.
I remember, like, NHL Network now, when they do NHL Tonight or whatever, it's fantastic. But I remember the first couple months of the first year, and they're like, it felt like they were building the set around them as they were talking.
What I found myself doing was I was watching the NHL Network as things were unfolding, and I had TSN. Well, actually, I had TweetDeck up because I follow the TSN insiders, right? And that's what I think Sportsnet's lacking right now. They don't have the solid insiders like a Bob McKenzie, a Darren Dreger.
So it'll take time.
Or a LeBron, Pierre. So I was kind of following those guys while I was watching Sportsnet's telecast through NHL Network.
It's funny how you have to be on Twitter now for a day like that.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't have, and this year it was so crazy. I mean, I remember years past where it's like, I'm on Twitter and nothing's happened. This year it would be like, it would say you have 5 new tweets or whatever, and I'd hit it, and it was like 4 new signings. Like,
right.
It was just insane on the morning of July 1st, how quickly guys went. So I guess that's because of that new period where you can talk to guys leading up to it.
Well, and then, my son and I we're clearly following two different sites and different Twitter accounts, and I'm going, oh, so-and-so's going here, and then he was going, no, look, so-and-so's going here, and he's going, oh, look, Dad, this is happening, and this is happening, and I'm like, my head was about to explode.
Well,
but I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't trade a second of it. So let's start in the West.
Okay.
And my theory, and you can tell me if you disagree, is that everybody good went West.
I don't disagree. In fact, I text you a couple of times during the day, and I'm like, oh, my God, what are we going to do next season? Because everybody got better.
The West was already so competitive, and this is not meant to be a bashing on the East show. It's not. I mean, there's some very good teams in the East, and there were some teams in the East that got better. We'll get to them in the second segment. But the West was already so deep last year, and then you just look at the guys that switched conferences, and Jason Spezza goes to Dallas. Brad Richards goes to Chicago for nothing, and I know that Brad Richards had his detractors in New York, but Chicago's not paying him anything, and they don't even need him to do that much.
Well, I mean, throughout the season, and you and I were on not only Rick Nash's back, but we kind of poked a little bit at Brad Richards because he just didn't seem like the Brad Richards that you expected from him. And then I looked up his point total. He finished with 51 points in an off season.
Yeah, he was fine during the regular season. And again, you go to Chicago and you're surrounded by that sort of talent.
Oh my God!
I don't know what his line mates are going to be. I mean, they're gonna juggle it around throughout the season. There's going to be times he plays with Jonathan Taves or Patrick Kane. Probably normally Marian Hossa, Patrick Sharp.
Okay, so let's just throw a couple of wings out there with Brad Richards. Brad, go. Saad, go with him. Shaw, go with him.
Yeah, you don't even think of Saad or Shaw. I mean, that team, the knock on Chicago, and I use air quotes for the knock on Chicago, was always that their number 2 center is a little shady. Well, Brad Richards won a Conn Smythe. He was one of the main reasons Tampa Bay won the Stanley Cup when they won.
Yeah, that was a heck of a pickup for Chicago. And then they turned around and they shored up their defense, too, and picking up, I think it was Kyle Klemsky. Is that who they picked up?
Did they pick up Quincy or Comiskey?
Comiskey.
Okay.
So, I mean, from the Swedish Elite League, the kid racked up 28 points. Oh, did I mention? He's a defenseman.
Well, yeah, he did mention that actually a couple times. Thanks. It's just a matter of those teams like Chicago. LA was a team that didn't do anything because they didn't have to do anything. They're already
They won
set.
the cup.
And Chicago really didn't have to do that much either. And so as I've the longer I've followed sports, I've reached that level where I now understand it's not just go out there and get this guy because he's the best player and I want this guy. It's all about value. If Brad Richards comes in there and he retires in the middle of the season because he just doesn't have the passion for the game anymore, it doesn't cost Chicago anything. And that's not going to happen. He's going to contribute. So that wasn't the best signing, but it was a good one.
It was a solid signing. I mean, that helped. I think that helps them.
They put themselves in that position where there's no risk. There's potentially great reward, and even if it doesn't happen, their lineup's still so loaded. Who cares?
Okay. So the team that stands out to me in the most throughout the free agency period that started on 7-1 is Dallas.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you.
I think Dallas just in picking up Ales Hemsky, they shored up their backup goalie with Anders Lindback, and then they signed Patrick Eaves. They picked up Jason Spezza. I mean, you look down the middle of that team now with Spezza, Eakin, Seguin.
It's remarkable what Jim Nill has been able to do there since he took over. They made the playoffs by 2 points last year, and it was the first time they'd made the playoffs in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was certainly thought, if you're looking around the West, of there was good teams that missed the playoffs last year.
Yep.
So how are those good teams going to get in? Somebody in the top 8 has to drop out. Maybe it'll be Dallas because they were 8th. I don't think it's going to be Dallas now.
And then you get veterans like Vern Fiddler, who said, I don't want to go anywhere. I'll take less cash. Ray Whitney's
still floating around. I don't know what's going to happen there.
We'll see. I mean, Dallas is one team that's got a little bit of room. Maybe they re-sign him. I don't know.
He's had a great career, and I don't want to see him retire, but Dallas doesn't even need him at this point.
That's true.
And now you look at what they did last year getting Tyler Seguin, and they gave up a decent player for him, and there's been a lot of parallels drawn from that trade to a trade that happened this year where Nashville, I know this isn't free agency, but they bring in James Neal. It's very similar in my mind to the Seguin deal from last year in that you're bringing in when Dallas got Sagan, they got a guy who was the number 2 overall pick, still very young, lots of potential, maybe he'll hit 40 goals someday. They had to give up Louis Eriksson.
Mm-hmm.
Nashville brings in James Neal. They give up nothing. I don't know if Pittsburgh just short-circuited or what. He's already scored 40 goals in the season. He probably won't in Nashville because he doesn't have the
talent around him.
But still, so now even Nashville got better, and they were outside the top 8.
True.
And they get Pecorine back, who didn't even play last year.
That's huge. I mean, I think, and we've discussed it on the show, that I think that's one of the things that hurt Nashville the most last year was losing their number 1 goaltender.
So you look at their team now, they have him back. You've got Seth Jones. You've got Shea Weber.
The X factor, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did. The X factor, I think, now for Nashville is coaching.
True, because you don't have that established system in place with Barry Trotz, but you have a good coach with Peter Laviolette.
You have a great coach, but it's still a new coach for the core of that team.
The West is just going to be insane this year. I mean, that's a team that was on the outside looking in, and they might still be on the outside looking in, and they've only gotten better.
Yeah, I mean, how about Anaheim?
Anaheim, the biggest move that they made was getting Ryan Kessler from Vancouver, which surprised me on a number of fronts, and you might, I don't know if you can back me up on this or not. First of all, it was weird that Vancouver would trade him in division. I mean, now they have to deal with
that.
Ryan
Bothered
Kessler.
Me.
Yeah. And I'm sure it bothered some Vancouver fans too.
But I think that in signing Kessler, and then the other signing that I liked that Anaheim did late in the day was they got Jason LaBarbera from Chicago.
Yeah.
That's a solid backup goaltender for Frederik Andersen. I'm giving Andersen the number 1 job right now.
And they have Gibson there too.
And you got the rookie Gibson. He'll probably go back down.
But either way, you've got a vet now with 2 very young goalies. So
it's what you need. And we both personally know Jason LaBarbera and his work ethic and what he's like in the room. So he's going to do nothing but help the goaltending on that team. And that team's a scoring machine by itself. They didn't have to add a whole lot.
But they do add Kessler. They give up Nick Bonino, Lucas Spiza, a first-round pick, and a third-round pick to Vancouver. Again, the weirdest thing to me was that Vancouver would trade him in the division, and that situation was handled so oddly. I feel like they could have got more than that from teams at the trade deadline last year when it looked like Kessler was going to be dealt.
Well, I think, and we spoke about this before we started recording, and I think that a lot of what was going on in Vancouver, because the guys in the front office in Vancouver right now is pretty much a new team. There's a couple of guys left over, but from GM down to the coaching staff, you're looking at a lot of new faces. Kessler didn't want to be there. You don't want that negative vibe in your room. So you got to do what you got to do. Anaheim says, we'll take him. They probably did say, guys, that's still in our division. Do we really want to do that? And they're like, yeah, we got to get that negative vibe out of the room, and we got to build. So then they get Kessler out of the room, and what do? They sign Radim Vrabada. The big signing of the day at the start of the day was Ryan Miller.
Yeah.
I mean that's huge
for
Vancouver.
Yeah, it's pivotal. You have to have a goalie. That was the biggest thing. They didn't have one because they had completely just blown out Luongo and Schneider.
But they got rid of, and it's funny because we joked about it a lot throughout the season, they got rid of a lot of the turmoil. Their turmoil was goaltending and an unhappy forward that didn't want to be there. Gone. So now they can focus on what they have and how they're going to move forward with it.
I'm with you on the Kessler thing of there is some sort of addition by subtraction. Just you don't want that. I mean, you're bringing in a new coach and the new GM, and just you're trying to put together a whole new culture around the team. So I do understand that. And I know that this was never a trade that was going to happen, but I don't understand why, if Pittsburgh was so bent on getting rid of James Neal, and they clearly wanted Kessler. I mean, they made it very clear last season. And if Vancouver's got to get rid of Kessler, why don't we ever just see a swap Kessler for Neal? Because then Vancouver gets a 40-goal scorer. Pittsburgh gets a guy like Kessler who they needed.
He's out of the conference.
They both get him out of the conference. Pittsburgh managed to get theirs out of the East, but Ryan Kessler definitely seems like somebody that's going to come back to haunt Vancouver 5 times a season on Anaheim, and he's a perfect fit for Anaheim.
Oh, absolutely. And then I want to give some honorable mentions in the West. To Calgary. I thought, and a lot of people don't agree with me, but I thought Calgary did really, really well.
A lot of people really don't agree with you.
I know.
Everything I've read considers the Flames one of the losers of free agency, which I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that. I mean, let's start goaltending.
Had to
Boom.
upgrade, and they did.
And they did. And they did it fairly inexpensively.
And you have to take Calgary for what they are. You can't grade them as saying, is this going to get them a Stanley Cup this year? That's not what they're trying to do.
I don't think they didn't do it, say, oh, okay, we're going to go for the Cup this year. There's no way. Then they signed defenseman Derek England. They've signed forward Mason Raymond. I like Mason Raymond. He's 40-plus points.
Yeah, I don't mind.
And he's young.
Raymond, and I don't mind England, but they overpaid a bit for Derek England, I thought. And that's from watching him all those years with the Penguins. Maybe they saw something that hasn't shown up in games yet. He's a good player, and he's a good tough guy, and he'll stick up for everybody on that team. And that is important because now you have a young roster that's probably going to feature Sam Bennett up front right away. So I understand why they brought him in, and they had cap room. So look, Calgary certainly has the money to go out there and try and build something. If you have to pay an extra $300,000 per year for Derek England, do what you got to do.
But until you get things going, I mean, behind Hiller, you've only got Ortillo and Ramo.
They had no goaltending last year.
So you're going to, A, goaltending, and B, you're going to need some defense.
Yeah.
And if you had to pay a little bit more than you should have, but that's okay as long as you're shoring that up. And you know me, goaltending, blue line, up the middle, and I'm okay with the Derek England. I thought that was a good pickup for him. I think Calgary is going to be improved this year coming up.
You always have to pay for defense no matter what level of defenseman that guy is. Now, quickly, we do have to touch on these three teams because these might have been three of the biggest. St. Louis adds Paul Stastny.
Yeah, they just get better.
And that is basically Team USA now with Oshie and Backus and Stastny and Shattenkirk. They don't really have a goalie yet, which was interesting to me.
I agree with that.
So I don't know if you really are going to depend on Brian Elliott or if you think Jake Allen's ready.
And then you mentioned, but they also, Doug Armstrong was able to get Yuri Lederer to come back.
So they're so deep up front. It's amazing now. And their defense is loaded too.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good hockey team.
They picked up Carl Gunnarsson from Toronto.
Interested to see if they can actually get over the hump in the playoffs this year. They take Stastny from Colorado, but Colorado gets Jarome Iginla. So I'm sure Colorado didn't want to lose Paul Stastny, and we'll get to some of their players later on.
But what better person to replace him?
Well, yeah, and that's a young team, and now you bring in a vet that I don't think Colorado could win the Cup this year just because they've moved up so quick. But could Colorado win the Cup this year? They're not a favorite, but could they actually do it?
I don't know if Colorado would win a Cup, but
could they?
Could they? Anybody could.
Well, that's not true. I'll give you some teams that can't.
But I think that they will go a lot deeper this year than they did last year.
Now you've added a veteran presence who still produces. And you lose.
What was his point
Stastny.
total last year?
I can double check that, but it was right up there near the top of the Bruins of all teams.
Yeah, he was top. He was one of the Bruins' leading scorers.
Yeah, he hasn't lost a step. I don't care what anybody says. And he's a physical presence too. So you have him out there, kind of defending guys like Matt Duchene and whoever else if Ryan O'Reilly comes back. So Colorado loses a big player in Stastny, but they made up for it. And then Minnesota, in the shocking signing of the year, gets Thomas Vanek, who it was already decided he was going to Minnesota 9 months ago.
Just backing up a couple of steps, 61 points.
I'll take that.
Here's the best part about Jerome's stats, because this is the type of stat that I love, and as a youth coach, I wish all my players could achieve this. 30 goals, 31 assists.
You're a big fan of the perfect split. You're not a big fan of the Ovechkin guys who get 55 goals and 20 assists or whatever.
No, I like the fact because that means he knows when to score and he knows when to assist. He knows how to make the guys around him better. But if there's nothing, he knows when to take that shot and to score. And I love that balance. I really, really like that. I mean, 30 and 31, holy smokes.
Yeah, I mean, valuable in all situations and is able to finish, but also can be the playmaker if you need him to be, if he's out there with a guy like Duchene.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, boy, the West, holy smokes. What about Edmonton?
All right, well, moving on to the East. You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey Podcast for even more hockey news.
#do it.
Segment 2, on to the East. Doug, there were some good players signed in the Eastern Conference. I just felt like we should start with the West because it seemed like
that's where we live.
Well, there were some. I don't think anybody would dispute, even if you live on Long Island, that a lot of the big names went west or moved around in the West.
That was a bad example.
Why?
That was a bad example.
All right. Well, how
because
about
anybody on Long Island, New York, New Jersey will argue with you just for the sake of arguing. That's what they do.
And I don't even want to get involved in that. And I do.
Send all the emails to Luke.
I know a lot of people from New York who absolutely do argue with me about hockey on a daily basis. So let's just say anybody in Virginia.
Okay.
They won't argue with you about anything. Where do you want to start in the East? I say we start
Other
in
than
Tampa.
shutting down the coal mines.
Well, that's a whole different podcast. I mean, I think we're recording that right after this one, right?
Okay.
All right. Do we have a good name for that show?
No,
The Coal Mine Podcast?
Yeah.
Okay,
we'll come up with it.
Tampa Bay adds Anton Strawman, I would say, is their biggest acquisition, but they did some wheeling and dealing before free agency, shipping Teddy Purcell out for Sam Gagner, then taking on part of Gagner's salary, sending him to Arizona. It was to clear salary cap space for a defenseman, and that defenseman ended up being Anton Strawman.
Right, but they didn't just sit there.
Well, I thought that was going to be Matt Niskanen, but it wasn't.
You know, they also picked up Brian Boyle, picked up a solid backup goalie in Nabokov.
Nabokov, it feels like he's on 3 teams every year.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to his credit, he's still playing, and he still plays extremely well. He's an older player, so that's going to happen.
And he doesn't have to do anything there. I mean, Ben Bishop nearly won the Vezina. He's going to routinely, he's their starter. He's going to take them as far as they're going to go. We saw it last year when he got hurt. Everything just stopped for Tampa Bay. I don't think they won another game after he got hurt.
I'll go on a quick tangent.
Doesn't sound like you at all.
And I read a tweet yesterday by Paul Bissonnette,
Okay.
who is an unrestricted free agent with the Arizona Coyotes. And somebody said to him on Twitter, "Hey, Paul, where are you playing next year? Rochester, Hamilton?"
Typical Twitter audience.
Right. And Paul answers back, I don't know, but I'll be playing hockey for a living. How's the job going?
Typical Paul Bissonnette answer back. That's pretty solid.
But the reason I brought it up is because I'm thinking the same thing. Nabokov is still playing. He's still playing at a high level, and he's still making money.
He's going to make another $1.15 million this year, which when you look at guys like Paul Stastny and Matt Niskanen, you're like, well, that's not that much. Take a step back and think about how much $1.15 million is, especially when you already have a bunch of millions of dollars.
You know, and Ben Bishop comes back healthy.
Tampa's intriguing because you know what you forget about with Tampa is you forget that Jonathan Drouin was one of the top picks last year and didn't play.
He'll be playing this year.
Yeah, so you look at Tampa and you're like, well, they lost St. Louis, and then 2 years ago they lost LeCavier. They're just not the same team. Well, they still have Stamkos. They re-signed Callahan. Jonathan Drouin is coming, and that's going to be an offensive weapon.
And you have, like I just mentioned, you have Ben Bishop, and now you got Nabokov backing him up. I mean, as a Tampa Bay fan, I'd be very, very comfortable with that. And they do have the firepower up front. And we'll see if their D can settle in and help out the back end.
So let's get to Washington because Matt Niskanen was kind of the main guy. He really benefited from a nice playoff run with the Penguins. He also benefited from
I just like him
playing with the Penguins, though, and from being a right-handed defenseman in a year where there just aren't any right-handed defensemen. I was kind of shocked Detroit didn't find a way to get him. And then Washington, for as much as they hate the Penguins, just went out and signed a bunch of Penguins.
And I text you while it was happening. I'm going, do you have any players left on your Penguins roster?
Don't. But that's a whole different thing we can get into when we get to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, Niskanen, Orpik. I thought Orpik got a little bit too much money.
Well, look at the Penguins back end. They lose Niskanen. He gets 7 years, $40.25 million. Orpik gets 5 years, $27.5 million. And Derek England gets $9 million over 3 years with Calgary.
Well, you know, I keep telling my boys who play defense is that, you know, everybody wants to be a forward, but nobody wants to be a defenseman.
That's where the money is in free agency.
Because every team needs it. You need solid defense. I mean, you need that. And I don't know if Orpik should have gotten the money he got, but the other good pickup that I thought that Washington did was a young goaltender in Justin Peters.
You're all over the goalies this year.
because there was a lot of goalie movement going on, and I'm looking at teams that kind of, Holtby had a really good season with Washington, and now with a young guy like Justin Peters sitting in behind him, who I think had a .919 save percentage and a 2.5 goals against. Not bad.
Where does Yaroslav Halak fit into all this? Because he went into that Bermuda Triangle of teams, which is the Islanders, the Sabres, and the Capitals.
I don't know.
And they just
did he go back?
Players get in there, and then they just bounce around, just constantly. They just move from team to team of those three. Either way, Washington addressed a need on defense. That's undeniable. Now they have a very good defense because you start to look at who they already had in place, and they have Barry Trotz coaching the team.
And speaking of Coach Trotz, I saw a great quote, and I'm paraphrasing his quote. He was asked questions about Ovechkin staying on the right wing, where Coach Oates had put him. And you and I talked about it in the season. Ovechkin took a while to get warm to being on that side of the ice. But when he did, he finished with 51 goals. Well, Coach Trotz was very quick to point, yeah, but he was also a -35.
Well, and that's very important.
But goaltending, I think they're a little bit safer. Shoring up the defense, and you got a coach that's going to address that -35. All he's going to do is make Ovechkin more of a two-way player. You can't just go down goal line to goal line, shoot, score, and then not skate back. No more skating up the ice and then hanging around in the offensive zone watching your guys back check, and you do a circle around the center ice because now it's coming back to you.
Yeah,
so
you score that way. It's supposed to be forecheck, backcheck, paycheck, right? Isn't that
correct?
That's
the saying. Yeah,
that's not how Ovechkin necessarily plays. But I think it's fair to say that Washington has underachieved for a lot of years.
Yes.
And I think that's going to change a little bit because now that defense is Niskanen, Orpik, Carlson, Mike Green, Carl Alsner, that's just 5 of your defensemen. And now all of a sudden, with Trotz coaching, Halak's not there. I don't know why I thought that. He's in the Islander system now. It's part of that Bermuda Triangle of teams. You've got Ovechkin and Backstrom up front. You should have some offense right there. It's an interesting team. It's a very intriguing team that has no excuses if they miss the playoffs this year.
I think you're also going to see a tougher Washington team because you have a very structured, disciplined coach.
Yeah.
He's going to make a difference on this bench.
Which they needed. And I guess to continue the smooth segues, they took a bunch of players from Pittsburgh, but the Penguins actually did something I liked. They did two things I liked on free agency day, which is shocking because leading up to free agency day, from the moment they got eliminated.
They signed 5 guys.
They did. From the second they got eliminated by the Rangers and they just decided to implode and blow up their roster for no real reason, Niskanen they weren't going to be able to keep. Orpik they weren't going to be able to keep because teams were going to throw so much money at them. They lose Jussi Jokinen to Florida. The James Neal deal I absolutely hate. I mean, you were standing next to me when it happened, and I think I made it pretty clear I hated it. And we were in public. But I do like the addition of Christian Ehrhoff for $4 million when there's so many defensemen going for so much money on free agency day. I don't know how they pulled that off. He's not even that old.
No, he's a good defenseman, and then you also got Taylor Chorney. He's just a young player, so
we haven't even gotten to the one I like, Thomas Greiss.
Brilliant pickup.
As much as I would love him to still be in Arizona with the Coyotes, I'm speculating here that he saw an opportunity for more playing time in Pittsburgh because he's watched Pittsburgh in the playoffs before and realized, hey, I'm their best playoff goalie just by going there. And he's a legitimate, very solid backup, and potentially, I mean, he's a guy who wants to be a starter someday. Fleury has 1 year left on his contract.
Yeah, I think also with bringing the caliber of a Thomas Greiss in behind Fleury, I think that Mr. Fleury's comfort zone just got invaded.
Great.
No, and I mean that in a positive way because now Thomas is going to push him to be better. You can't have that complacency anymore. You've got a year left on your contract, and now you got somebody that wouldn't mind having your number one spot. You're going to have to perform.
I used to care about Fleury's comfort zone. I don't anymore. I like the guy as a person, but I've seen enough in the playoffs. But what the Penguins had 2 years ago that they didn't have this year was, whatever, give Fleury the nod in the playoffs. He's a great regular season goalie.
Mm-hmm.
And he has won a Stanley Cup, or he was on a team that won a Stanley Cup, maybe is a better way to put it. But 2 years ago, they could go to Vaucoon in the playoffs. this past year they had nobody to go to because Vokun was hurt. Now you have Thomas Greiss, who's still a relatively young goalie, who is absolutely trying to be a starter at some point. He signs for a year. Maybe he gets more playing time there, or maybe he goes through this again next year. But nice pickup for Pittsburgh for cheap.
Oh, yeah. So let's shuffle off to Buffalo. They were active.
They did a lot.
The big one for me for Buffalo, and I thought was fantastic, was getting Matt Moulson.
Yeah, so if you look at it now, they traded Vanek, who they weren't going to be able to keep. Help me through this craziness with the Islanders, for Moulson, correct?
Correct.
Moulson apparently liked it there, and they liked him, but they traded him
to Minnesota,
got some stuff, and then went out and got Moulson back.
Brilliant.
So they played everybody, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. And then on top of it, they sign forward Brian Giunta and Josh Georges from Montreal. I think are two great pickups. They got a Cody McCormick, third, fourth line forward. And they re-signed. Who'd they buy out? Lino and Ehrhoff, which you benefited from.
Yeah, Ehrhoff wasn't really bad there, but it just wasn't working. Billy Lano, I don't know what happened to that guy. That was a byproduct of them trying to spend money when they got new ownership, and it just didn't work out. But Gianta's a leader, a proven leader.
Oh, absolutely, and he's playing in a comfort zone now with his buddy Georges.
Yeah.
Right? Speaking of defensemen, they also signed Andre.
Were we? Oh, you were. Okay.
I am so bad with these European names. They're killing me.
I really hope you get like a play-by-play job in the KHL or something.
Oh, I just put a bullet in my head.
I would absolutely listen to every single game and not know what happened. You'd be like 5 minutes behind trying to pronounce somebody's name.
Hey, he scored.
New Jersey. I feel like we'll give New Jersey 10 seconds.
Hello.
They signed Martin Havlat and Mike Camilleri and got younger by doing it.
Camilleri is a great signing.
Camilleri is a great signing, but just let that sink in for a second. They signed Havlat and Camilleri and actually got younger. I mean, New Jersey's loaded with guys in their 40s, and
so then we Florida.
Got to touch on
Florida. Oh my goodness, 6 players.
Another team that's actually getting a lot of criticism for their signings, which is interesting to me. They had to sign players to get up to the salary cap floor.
6 players for more than $17 million.
Okay.
That's less than $3 million per player.
Dave Bolin.
That's pretty good.
Bolin probably got more from them because they had to get to the salary floor. UC Okunin was really good in Pittsburgh. I'm sure at some point we'll do a fantasy hockey preview show. His value just completely evaporated. Maybe not, actually. Sean Thornton, Derek McKenzie, Willie Mitchell, and Al Montoya to back up Roberto Luongo. So now
I think Willie Mitchell was a good pickup.
He's a savvy vet that just won a Stanley Cup.
And, and then the Montoya is solid backup goalie to Luongo. Florida made some really good moves. They also bought out Ed Jovanovski. So Ed's back on the prowl. Detroit.
Well, hold on.
Nada.
Hold on. Well, we're not done with Florida yet.
Okay.
So now they have Gerard Gallant as their coach.
Correct.
New coach who is familiar with Jonathan Huberdeau.
Correct.
So now maybe you get Huberdeau out of that sophomore slump. You bring in a guy like Jokinen. They didn't have Luongo for much at the end of last year, but now they have him. You just brought in Aaron Ekblad via the draft, the easiest name to say in the draft, and I couldn't say it there for some reason. And then Alexander Barkov was hurt last year for pretty much the second half of the season as well. I'm not saying Florida is going to be some amazing team next year, but they do seem to have gotten themselves on track to at least be heading up. Maybe they compete for a playoff spot within the next 2 years?
Oh, yeah. I think so. I mean, you got some good veterans on that team, too. You got guys like Scotty Upshaw.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've got guys like Scotty Gomez.
Any other Scotties? The Florida Scotties?
So, no, I think they're really well poised, and I thought they did really, really well in the free agency run this year. It was funny, I was looking through the teams and what this team did and what that team did, and then I looked at Boston, and Boston did nothing. Nothing.
It literally did nothing.
No new signings, no re-signings, no trades,
no
buyouts, no nothing.
You know why? Because they're Boston, and they probably should have gone to the Stanley Cup.
They should have been in the Stanley Cup. I agreed with that. Absolutely.
Columbus, Detroit, Philadelphia didn't really do a whole lot either. And Detroit, I just wonder if something's still going to happen. And there's not a ton of free agents out there at this point, but maybe they're going to make a trade or something. I really thought they were going to add Niskanen. It's weird to see Detroit not do anything.
What do you think of Manny Mahorta going to Montreal?
It's nice to see that guy playing hockey again. It really is, with the injury he had. And, it's one of those guys that maybe you don't hear a lot about until the playoffs.
Right.
But he's got that experience that, he can be helpful. And that's a team that will probably make the playoffs. So maybe
what about our boys in blue, the Rangers?
You knew they were going to lose players, correct?
Yes.
And they are able to go out there and get Dan Boyle. And they were able to keep Dominic Moore, which is just a good story. I think the Rangers are maybe a little down from last year. They're not going to the Stanley Cup, but they could have kept all their players, and they weren't going to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I agree.
So the important thing is they re-signed Henrik Lundqvist a few months ago, and that's really all that matters.
And then there's my boys.
Wow. How'd they do?
Not much. I did like the Stefan Robidas pickup.
It's a nice pickup.
It's a nice veteran defenseman. I like it. I like the fact that they picked up Leo Komarov. I think he's a good center.
Inject some personality back into that team.
Yeah, I'm okay. I mean, I would have liked to seen a little bit more. I'm hoping that the goaltending situation gets fixed before the season starts, or Toronto's going to be right back where they were last year.
What odds do you put on that getting fixed before the season starts?
I don't want to put odds on it.
And
just upset me.
Have you planned what you're going to do when they win the Stanley Cup this year? Like a good Maple Leafs fan does every single year, and then just
wow, here comes the kidney punch after kidney punch.
Just closes out with much disappointment in the month of usually April, but sometimes May.
Hurricanes didn't do much. What about our boys on the island?
Well, they always do a bunch of stuff, but it never really adds up to anything.
What kills me about Long Island is they signed 5 players, and they're still $14 million under the cap. And Garth Snow just seems to print money but not spend money. I mean, how is that team still 14 under?
You know what it is? Because I feel like they are always spending money on players that declare they're not going there. And so then they get to keep that money back. I don't know. The Islanders, this is their last year on Long Island. And from what I understand, they were basically given the edict of, we're making the playoffs this year. They should make the playoffs because they have John Tavares. But I don't know if Nikolai Kulemin or Mikhail Grabovski really pushes them over the top.
Well, you got some good goaltending in Chad Johnson, I think.
That's a nice little backup pickup.
You're listening to The Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
Final segment, news and notes. Doug,
news and notes with a twist.
News and notes.
This time.
That sounds like a bad soda product. News and notes with a twist.
Of lime.
We've got the NHL Awards here, and I feel like we do need to touch on these. It feels like it was forever ago now, and really it was like a week and a half. Not even a week and a half.
It seems a lot longer than that.
The off-season is busy.
Between the awards, the draft, and then free agency, it just seems like the NHL needs to space it out. Because it's just like, bam, bam, bam.
Crammed in there.
And then this year, for guys that, do what we do, guys like yourself and other peers, they had to do the NBA draft
the day before
the NHL draft. I mean, I saw guys the day of the NHL draft on the June 27th with bags under their eyes.
Yeah, because that's 2 very different drafts.
Yeah.
And now the NBA is working in all these European players, so you start to confuse the names. I mean, I don't, because all I do is pay attention to hockey. But still, if you're just trying to cover both and you're kind of an equal fan of both sports, 2 drafts within 24 hours is weird. And don't get me wrong, I loved it the last week or so, but I don't know what day today is. And 3 weeks from now, I'm going to wish that the award show was then or something.
All I know is tomorrow is July 4th. I'm playing hockey, and I'm barbecuing hamburgers.
That's about all you can ask for right there.
Darn tootin'.
That's about as American as it gets. So we'll start with the award show, which was up in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there every year it's been in Vegas to cover it, and it's gotten progressively better each year. Like, the NHL puts on a great show as far as if you're just watching it, but behind the scenes, they take care of the media better and better. It's just more organized each year. This year was no exception. It was at the Wynn/Encore. Which
is a very nice hotel.
Very nice hotel, and it's cool because when you walk in there, and really any fan can walk into this part, just walk into the casino. Anybody that walks by in a suit is probably somebody that either plays in the NHL or is involved in the front office. I was trying to get my way out of there. It's very confusing and huge, and I've been there before. And I'm following this guy who's pushing a stroller, and I'm like, I'll just follow this guy. He's got to know where he's going. He's pushing a stroller. It's Chris Pronger, and he didn't know where he was going, by the way.
Awesome.
Until Corey Perry showed up and led him out the right door, and I followed behind because I was just trying to get out of the casino at the end. But great show. Colorado was really the story for the most part.
Oh, absolutely.
And you and I have our predictions we made on the last show. I say we start with the Calder because I think it was probably the single easiest award to call that I can remember in the last 10 years.
Yeah, if you called anybody but Nathan MacKinnon.
The only people that didn't think MacKinnon were going to win were probably Tyler Johnson's mother and Andre Palat's mother. Those had to be the only people that – and those guys had good seasons, but MacKinnon wins a landslide. You and I both like this guy a lot.
Oh, this guy's phenomenal. He's young, talented, mature.
He has the right attitude.
Very well spoken, and yeah, his head is on right.
And he talked about coming to Colorado, who, remember, had the number one pick last year and ended up winning that division, just the expectations that were put on him and also that he put on himself.
No, I didn't really come in with much, to be honest with you. I think with expectations, you either set them too high or too low. I learned that even growing up, you don't have to play in the NHL and that kind of stuff. And, for me, I just wanted to try to make an immediate impact and try to help the team win every night. And, some nights I did, some nights I didn't, but I definitely learned a lot from the season.
And there you go. I mean, he clearly, in listening to him speak, you can tell how poised he is for a young man. You know what? I'm an old man, and I'm not even that mature. He's got me hands down.
Well, there you go. That's how high you set the bar for Nathan MacKinnon. He talked a lot about, and really all of the Colorado players talked about this, which is why I was kind of surprised to see Stastny leave.
Mm-hmm.
Just MacKinnon was there, Ryan O'Reilly was there, Patrick Waugh was there. Talking to all three of them, you could tell that was just there was a bond there. And MacKinnon was very candid about the fact that he was very fortunate to land on a good team after being picked number one. He also talked about how it was nice that Waugh kind of started him off playing wing a lot to begin the year, and it helped ease his transition in where he could be so productive. He's from Cole Harbour. He talked about Sidney Crosby a lot as well, and those two, I didn't realize how close they were. I just thought they were from the same city. But MacKinnon talked about how he pulls for Crosby to win the Hart this year, how he was still mad he didn't win the Calder 7-8 years ago. And then when Crosby got up there, he talked about MacKinnon too. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic between those two. But you heard MacKinnon. I feel like we have to hear from Ryan O'Reilly, who was probably the next easiest one to name.
The lady being.
Ryan O'Reilly finished the year with 2 penalty minutes.
And gobs of points.
Over 60 points. I want to say 61 off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have it in front of me, but yes.
And he was asked a few questions, but one of them was about the sort of intensity that Patrick Waugh brought to the Avalanche in his first year.
All throughout the year, he always reinforced of whether it was whatever we did to do it intense and to do it as best we could, and constantly reminding us that there was times where we could have relaxed a bit, but he kept us going. He made adjustments when he needed to. That without those adjustments, there's no way we would have won the division.
Now his comments don't surprise me in the least, because when I think of Patrick Waugh, I think of intensity, but a controlled intensity. You know what I'm saying? Like when I look at Patrick Waugh, I'm like, okay, we can't mess with this dude because he's just so focused. And you can feel you watch him on the bench on a television, and you can feel the intensity that he is so into the game that his competitive, his competitiveness has not left him.
He knocked the glass down between the two benches in his first game. Okay? Let's not forget. He did seem a lot more calm and reserved. Ryan O'Reilly, 64 points. 2 penalty minutes, and
let's qualify the 2 penalty minutes.
Yeah, it was a broken stick that he held on to.
He held on to a broken stick for
too long. But I will say this, and I specifically asked him how crazy it was to go through a season where you get 2 penalty minutes, but also are still producing.
Right.
And he said flat out, "Yeah, I probably got away with a few." I mean, and the other thing he said was also he got moved to the wing this year, and it's a lot easier to not take penalties on the wing, at least in his mind, and he should know. Look at the season he just had. because you don't necessarily have to be as physical on the wing.
That's the center's job, man.
Yeah.
The center's in the corner mucking it up.
So you're not
at both ends.
You're not jostling with players offensively and defensively in front of nets. I thought that was
all
insightful.
a winger has to do is be in the right spot. It's that easy.
Yeah. So I thought that was actually some good inside hockey there from Ryan O'Reilly, and they all gave Patrick Waugh credit. It was weird to see Patrick Waugh not subdued. I mean, he was happy, but just
humble.
Humble. That's a good way to put it. And humble's the best way to put it.
Never thought it would ever happen, to be honest with you. Then it's fun to see it happening, but I know why I'm receiving this trophy, because I have a group of players that made a commitment and bought into what we wanted to do, and they had in mind to surprise the world of hockey, and that's exactly what they've done by winning the Central Division. I mean, it's a special group, and all I can do today is I cannot thank them enough today for what happened.
His comments are why I like hockey players. It's why I love the game. The game is such a true team sport, and it doesn't matter if you talk to a head coach, starting center, starting goalie. Everybody gives credit to everybody else because they know that the game has to be played as a team to be successful. Nobody goes, oh, yeah, I'm great, and I did this, and I did that. You never hear that coming out of a hockey player's mouth, ever.
The Patrick Waugh story is amazing to me because it embodies all the points you just made. Like, this guy goes down in history as one of the 2 or 3 best goalies of all time. Made a ton of money. He doesn't need to keep coaching. Most superstar Hall of Fame players don't coach. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they don't coach is because they either get handed a job at the NHL level because they're a fan favorite and then they don't have the background in coaching and they don't have success, or they don't want to go through what Patrick Waugh went through to get to this point. He went through all the junior ranks of coaching after he was done with his Hall of Fame playing career, and it's paid off.
Paid his dues as a player, paid his dues as a coach. And again, I think we've made this comparison once before on the show. I look at goalies that turn coaches as the same as catchers that become managers. They have such a different perspective of the game because of the position they play, and it always seems to transcend into success.
And it really has for them. Again, I don't think Colorado wins the Stanley Cup next year, but
they're going to be close.
They are getting close, and they're doing it so quickly. So you touched on goalies. Semyon Varlamov was one of the finalists for the Vezina. At this point,
that's who I picked.
I should note that we're both 3-0.
Perfect.
Now we're at the Vezina. You said Varlamov. I said Rask. Rask won. I'm 4-0. Take that.
I'm 3-1.
So it's 4-3 Lipinski. The Vezina this year was really close because Ben Bishop had a great year too.
Yeah, but those injuries will usually mess that stuff up.
Yeah, let's move on to the Norris because I feel like you need some sort of uplifting here after losing.
The Norris makes me tear up a little bit because I always think of the old Norris division and my team at the bottom of it.
Duncan Keith won. We both picked him. And
to me, that was a no-brainer.
He was up against Zdeno Chara, and now I'm going to blank on somebody else that was right there that should have won. Say Shea Weber. Was Weber there again?
I don't think Weber was there.
Okay. Now I'm going to feel like an idiot. But either way, Duncan Keith won. And
he's the best in the league.
He was very appreciative of his teammates, and he talked a lot about Brent Seabrook. And this is Keith's second time winning. And he pointed out on a couple different answers to questions from the media how Brent Seabrook not only is a good friend of his off the ice, but having him as a D partner allows him to be offensive and not get burned defensively.
Well, and I think you see a lot of that in the league, whereas, we're close to the Arizona Coyotes, and, you would see a Derek Morris out there with a Keith Yandel. Keith Yandel is an offensive-minded defenseman. Derek Morris is more of a stay-back, stay-home type of defenseman. So that allows a Keith Yandel to be successful offensively with the puck. Same thing with the Seabrook-Duncan Keith situation. And again, we go right back. What does he do? He thanks his teammates.
On multiple occasions.
Right.
Talked about how him and Seabrook and Patrick Sharp are all really good friends off the ice, and that gives you 4 right. That gives me 5 right. And for the record, Shea Weber was the third one.
Okay.
So take that. The Selke, you're going to get one back here. That was very close this year. Anze Kopitar, Patrice Bergeron, Jonathan Toews. Bergeron wins. You had Bergeron. I had Kopitar. Admittedly, I went a little off the playoffs.
Yes,
there.
you did.
Kopitar, though, has the highest Corsi rating every year. And I just feel like if that's really going to be that big of a stat, he should win the Selke at some point. Either way, Bergeron not only won that, he's the cover boy for NHL 15. It was like Patrice Bergeron night at the Win.
Yeah, but, the cover, that's a big deal. I mean, because they have the big contest where all the fans are voting for their favorite team player to make the cover.
Yeah, kind of cool to see somebody like Bergeron, who's not the flashiest player. I mean, certainly a very valuable player, but kind of cool to see him win.
Dude, he works, and he scores, and he plays hurt. And
very hurt.
He's a hockey player.
He had concussion issues early in his career. You wondered if he was ever going to turn into the player he is, and he's improved. And, yeah, last Stanley Cup, so now a year and a half ago, playing with the punctured lung, and, like, every bone was broken, and yeah.
Put me in, coach.
Yeah, he's like, I got this. Don't worry. It's not going to be an issue. GM of the year we both got wrong. I took Marc Bergevin of Montreal. You took Dean Lombardi of L.A. And Anaheim, Bob Murray ends up getting the victory.
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
So 3 very good candidates, and you do kind of forget that
because, we just discussed in the first 2 segments the free agency thing, and Murray just picked up Kessler, and he made a big, strong offensive team bigger and stronger and more offensive. And I'm like, and not offensive in the negative way as in producing goals. And I'm like, I thought Anaheim was going to go deep this year. And if they don't go deep next year, then Bob Murray's got some bigger problems.
Well, and they've had all those goalies. I mean, they ship out Jonas Hiller. Lose him in free agency. They don't even need him. They trade Victor Fast at the trade deadline. They don't even need him. They've got Frederick Anderson. Wow. I thought if I just kept talking, you wouldn't be able to jump in. And they have Gibson, too, so they're set up for a while now. The Masterton, it was a pretty cool story that Dominic Moore won that one. You and I are tied going into the final trophy.
Okay.
The Hart Trophy. Any idea who won that?
The Hart
Trophy. That's for the most valuable player in the National Hockey League.
Somebody that shouldn't have won it.
Claude Giroux was third. Flyers fans, for some reason, thought he should win. And Claude Giroux's got his own issues now going on off the ice this week, but whatever. Ryan Getzlaf came in second, which was your pick. And he had a great year. Sidney Crosby wins.
Crosby wins, but I think that Getzlaf did more for his team.
Well, Crosby was up there for a while, and he had quite a few things to say. And then the mood went downhill when somebody asked him why nobody wants to coach the Penguins and really who he wants as a coach.
It's a tough question. I think any coach that coaches at the NHL level, they're going to have all those characteristics and discipline within their group and high expectations coming into that position. I think understanding that, having to manage that all year when you win a few games in a row and it's not really that impressive, you have to find ways to motivate and find ways to get the best out of guys. So I think that's the same for any coach, and ultimately, a coach needs the players to succeed on the ice, and how they do that's different, maybe a bit, but for the most part, it's pretty much similar.
I'm with Sidney on that. I mean, if you're a coach and you're asked to coach at the NHL level, you know what you're doing. And I think that he's not proven yet at the NHL level, but Mike Johnston is going to do a good job.
Yeah, and Johnston was hired within 24 hours of when that audio was recorded. So at the moment, they didn't have a coach, but they had one the next morning.
But, I mean, like I said, Sidney's right. If you can make the NHL as a coach, then you belong there.
I like Johnston.
And it's up to you to lose your job. The best thing about the Johnston deal was who they hired as his assistant.
Yeah, they get Rick Tocchet in there, and I should point out that Washington took one of the Penguins' old former assistants, too. So the Capitals are almost like Penguins South now. But anyway, yeah, Rick Tocchet.
But the thing I love about the Tocchet thing is that the stars in that room are not going to be able to push away or push around a young coach because Tocchet won't let it happen.
Yeah. I mean,
he just won't.
He's an intimidating presence who has been there.
He's been there, and he's a very strong presence, and he's disciplined, and he will bring that discipline to the room and to the bench, and that will give Mike Johnston, this is my opinion, the ability to do what he needs to do as head coach.
And he's had a ton of success with the Portland Winterhawks. So as much as Pittsburgh looked like they botched the GM thing and then were botching the coaching thing, they actually came out of the coaching situation okay, I think.
Yeah, but it's not. It's one thing to get an NHL head coaching position, But it's another thing to walk into a room that's got Sidney Crosby, that's got a Malkin. I mean, there's a lot of superstars on that roster that you have to deal with, not only on the ice, but with egos. They're going, well, who's this guy? Where's he been? You know, he's going to have to prove himself to the room, and he will, because he's a solid coach. But it's a little bit harder when you walk into a room like that than walking into a young room in Edmonton.
Yeah, and a lot of that starts with Crosby. I mean, if he signs off on the coach, then the other guys in the locker room are going to sign off on him too. And Crosby took the high road on the Desjardins rumors because, of course, he turned down Pittsburgh to go to Vancouver. He was asked about that, and Crosby's like, look, everybody's got their own reasons for doing what they're doing. We don't know what's going on in his personal life. My thought was, I don't know why you coach Vancouver over anybody, but I didn't voice that opinion. That was that was just going through my head. But he also gave a lot of credit to Nathan MacKinnon, as I said. He was asked because he won 3 trophies, which one was the most important to him. And you could tell he looked around because it was all NHL writers. And he's like, well, I like the Hart, but the Lindsay, and I've heard other players say this before too, might mean the most to him because that's his opponents that voted on it. So when you're a player and you're voted the best player by your peers, there is something extra to that.
Well, and it goes right back to what we just talked about in this segment, is that these guys really put a value on their teammates and what each teammate brings to a game and to each other. So, yeah, to have your peers vote for you, it's got to be huge because that's what means the most to these guys.
And PK Subban was doing interviews, and he asked Crosby how he had so much success this year, and his answer was, I play on a good team. So there you go. That's right back to your point. He also was asked if injuries, obviously had some injuries there for a couple of years, if that changed his outlook from the last time he won the Hart. Because he won the Hart one other time only, and he was 19 at the time. And he said, yeah, it kind of gave me more perspective now. I appreciate it a little bit more. But the thing that stood out to me was he said this year's loss to the Rangers in the playoffs was the toughest he's taken a playoff exit since 2008 against Detroit. That was interesting to me.
Well, it is interesting because we've both discussed it, that series against New York came down to 3 games.
Yeah, and they all went wrong.
And Pittsburgh was looking pretty good up until that point. I mean, I can't put my finger on exactly what went wrong, but it went south, and New York capitalized on it.
I think that's telling, too, because the Penguins as an organization seem to have taken this year's loss harder than any of those previous losses.
Yeah, they didn't stay pat. I mean, they got rid of their GM, they got rid of their coach, they brought in a new GM, brought in a new coach, got rid of a lot of players.
Traded James Neal, which I still scratch my head at, but I mean, they lost players of free agency. You can tell it's kind of like San Jose over in the West. They had that 3-0 lead against LA. They lost it, and now San Jose seems like they don't know who they are anymore. Pittsburgh seems to have gotten back on track over these last couple of days, but it definitely affected them.
I'm surprised with all the goalie stuff. Just to recap real quick, all the goalie stuff that happened in free agency, I was surprised that San Jose didn't do anything.
So does that mean Stalock is the starting goalie there? Or is it like a timeshare with him and Niemi?
I have no idea, but I mean, clearly that was their Achilles heel in the playoffs. It got them to that goalie situation got them to the playoffs, but once they reached the playoffs, and you and I discussed it before the playoffs started, they couldn't even announce who their number 1 was.
Not a good sign. And
Not a good sign.
Niemi's won a Stanley Cup before. Like I was so confused by what happened to them in the playoffs.
Can you imagine a Ryan Miller in San Jose?
No. I can't even imagine him in Vancouver.
Yes, I mean, such a great pickup for Vancouver, but I mean,
assuming they make him
why
a starter.
Wouldn't Doug Wilson even take a look at it?
Maybe he did take a look at it.
We don't know.
But that was my thought when Vancouver got him. Now they have to go trade for Jonas Enroth and then say Ryan Miller's not the starter because you always have to have that goalie controversy in Vancouver. So quickly to the draft.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the draft also happened.
Forgot about the draft.
Since the last show. The last show wasn't even that long ago. It was like 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Everything has happened. We touched on Aaron Ekblad going number 1 overall when we talked about Florida.
Again, the hockey podcast was correct. Yeah. Thank you, THP fans.
And you're excited because it was a defensive player.
Absolutely, dude. The NBA draft, number 1 pick, Canadian.
Yeah, I know.
NHL draft, number 1 pick, defenseman.
I'm well aware. Also
good
Canadian.
2 days for Doug.
That's the top 4 rounded out with Sam Reinhart going to Buffalo, Leon Draisaitl going to Edmonton, Sam Bennett goes to
What do you think about Bennett going 4th? I thought he was going to go higher.
Well, Bennett, if you looked at the Hockey News, when they send out their annual scouting reports, he was ranked number 1. But Central Scouting had these 4 guys in one order, and then International Scouting had them in a different order. Like every report you read had those 4 guys as the top 4, but in a different order. I thought Ekblad would go number 1 because Florida needed a defenseman. And if somebody traded up, they were trading up to get a defenseman. From there, it was just kind of a
So look
toss-up.
at the number 1 pick by the Panthers and what they did in free agency. That pick's looking pretty good.
And Barkov and Huberdeau coming back.
And look at that. First goalie. When did the first goalie go? Second round, Mason McDonald to Calgary.
I don't know that we're going to see a lot of first-round goalies anymore. I really don't.
Yeah, that's...
I have 2 reasons for it. You want to hear them?
Yeah.
You don't have a choice because we're doing a podcast, so I'm
Okay.
going to tell you. When I looked at the last 15 years, the number 1 overall picks, because I wanted to see if I was correct in my assertion I made a couple weeks ago that NHL teams rarely ever miss on the number 1 overall pick in the last 15 years. And the only 2 that were kind of shaky, one was Rick DiPietro, which isn't shaky. That just didn't go well. Marc-Andre Fleury, for as much as I pile on him, was not a terrible pick. I never would have wanted him to go number 1. But either way, those are the last 2 goalies that went number 1 overall. And then you combine that with the fact that guys like Dominik Hasek and Henrik Lundqvist and those sorts of Pekka, those guys go late in the draft. Why are you using an early pick on a goalie? I don't think we're going to see it very often.
Well, I think the other thing too that you have to in watching the free agency coverage, and the goalie's name is escaping me. Young goalie, big kid. Doug, come on, think. Anyways,
team.
The point I'm trying to make in a very difficult way is that the guy's 3 or 4 years into the NHL, and they're still talking about tweaking his game.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with goalies, is that they're always tweaking it because it comes down to fundamentals and angles and how you play and left-handed, right-handed, size, and how you cover the net and stuff like that. You get different goalie coaches trying to get these guys to be better. And I don't think that just because a guy's a good goalie in juniors that he's going to be a great goalie in the NHL, because they're always tweaking the offensively with the equipment. Things are changing. The goalies have got to stop these 120-mile-an-hour shots. So I think that's why, is that a goalie's always developing a little bit more. Like, I know that you have a forward or a defenseman. They're always working on their skating. They're always working on their stride. I mean, you and I watch Shane Doan after practice, just minutes, 15, 20, 30 minutes after the team has left the ice. He's still working on parts of his game.
Yeah.
It never stops. But a goalie, I think, just because some goalies need to be technically sound. I mean, there's a lot into the fundamentals of playing goal that are always being developed.
Well, and I think, too, you have to look at, you don't expect a lot of these guys to come right in as skaters and step in and make an impact at age 18. But usually, first rounders, you're expecting them to get in there at 19 or 20. Goalies really, the kind of conventional wisdom within the game is that they really don't hit their stride till 25, 26. That's not old for a goalie to kind of break in and really become the player that you hope he can be. And so it's tough to take a guy in the first round that you might not see in your lineup for 5-6 years.
And one real last quick point is the fact that with a goaltender, and again, my opinion, a lot of it is between the ears.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there's the physical attributes, but the goalies, there's so much going up in there, and how you deal with a goal. Okay, a guy scores on you. How do I deal with that? Do I get down? Do I stay up? I mean, it's a weird position. Plus, I got guys firing these little black things at me all the time. I mean, I think the mental part of the game for a goaltender is a little bit more difficult than for a skater.
And I think a lot of it just comes down to where you land, because there's so much developmental time after you get drafted. Like, we see it all the time here in Phoenix. If you're with Sean Burke, you become a very good goalie very quickly.
Correct.
So as a goalie, you want to land in a situation where, whether it's somebody at the minor league level or whoever, they can teach you the professional way to play goaltender, because all of these guys have talent. I mean, if you're getting drafted, it doesn't matter
if
around.
you make the NHL, you got talent.
You have talent. Very quickly, anybody else stood out to you? Michael Del Cole went 5th. I was happy that the Islanders didn't screw that up, because he seemed like he might even have the potential to be the best player in this draft someday.
I think Toronto's pick at 8 Nylander was a good pick.
That was a nice pickup.
Nothing really just jumps out at me.
Hayden Fleury went He was the number 2 defenseman. He went to Carolina at 7. I really liked Brendan Perlini to the Coyotes at 12. I was kind of surprised he was still there. Mm-hmm. Size and speed. Very young, too.
He's a big boy. Oh, my goodness, he's a big boy.
And that speaks to the trend in the NHL, but especially in the West. Look how the Kings keep winning the Stanley Cup. You have to have guys like that.
Look at the West. Look at Anaheim. Look at San Jose. Look at the Kings. Those are thick teams.
Yeah. But you also have to be able to score. Look, Nick Ritchie went 2 picks ahead of Perlini, and he went to Anaheim, 6'2", 230 pounds. Doesn't have the speed of Perlini, but almost as big.
Again, you got to go through them.
You do have to go through them. You heard me complain about the Penguins nonstop after the coaching situation, but they got Kasperi Kapanen at 22, and
that's a good pick.
Stunned that he fell that far. There was people talking about him in the top 10, and so I guess my last thing on the draft, you came in, you knew who the top 4 were in some order. You knew Dal Cole was going 5th, and then from there, boy, if you looked at scouting reports and mock drafts, there were guys that were projected to go 6th and 7th that went in the second round, it felt like. And then there was guys that were projected to go 22, 23 that went 8th. It was crazy.
I don't think you're going to see that next year.
No, probably not. That's it for episode 45. Join us next time as we discuss potential trades, run down the remaining free agents, and look at some of the prospect camps taking place around the league.
And we'll also take a close look at the status of defenseman PK Subban, who should hopefully, by the time we do episode 46, have a new long-term contract with Montreal.
Yeah, that would make sense. Plus, whatever other news breaks in the coming days. Thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.